Should you upgrade your precision rifle to a Modular Driven Technologies ESS chassis? Stick with us to find out. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and we are here with our much-awaited Modular Driven Technologies ESS chassis review. And this is the ESS chassis sitting in front of me, and it is Modular Driven Technologies' latest chassis in their lineup. And they really stepped it up a notch. They really took a lot of effort and a lot of time and built in a ton of features into this chassis system that really benefits the precision rifle competition shooter and the casual precision rifle shooter as well. So we're going to go over the complete chassis here. We're going to talk about the features on it. We're going to talk about some of the options on it because there are quite a few different options you can configure. And we're going to talk about my experience with it, shooting it in a couple of matches, shooting it over some product reviews, and generally how well it has worked out for us. First thing I do want to get out of the way, in full disclosure, Modular Driven Technologies does sponsor our Mail Call Mondays episode, but they have had no influence whatsoever in the actual review of this chassis system. What you're going to get are my genuine thoughts and my genuine feelings over how the chassis has worked for me and how it may work for you. So let's go ahead and get into the chassis itself. Now, first of all, there are 7 different options for what rifle receivers this chassis will fit, and you get to pick those from their drop-down boxes on their website when you go in to configure this rifle. And really, right now, the best way to purchase the chassis system is to go on Modular Driven Technologies site, and they basically have a menu system. You start by configuring what rifle it's going to go for, which is what center section you'll get on here, and then you'll pick your Foreend tube and then your buttstock configuration. We have it on a Remington 700 short action right here, but they also have it available for the long action. They have it available for Savage, Tikka, Howa, and quite a few other rifles. So definitely go on the page and check it out. Now, the first thing, we will talk about the Foreend here because there are a lot of different options on the Foreend, and that's really one of those things that's going to have a great impact on how the system works for you. The Foreend that we have configured on the rifle right now is their NV Rail Foreend, and this is the 15-inch NV Rail version. Foreends come in 12 inches, 15 inches, or 18 inches, although not all lengths are available in all of the Foreend types. So we do have the 15-inch NV Rail version on here, and what that gives us is a 12 o'clock rail that we can utilize to mount a clip-on night vision device or a laser illuminator or anything that needs to be aligned at 12 o'clock to the bore of the rifle. On the sides where we have no rails, we do have an M-LOK interface, so you can put rails wherever you want to put rails. And then finally, we do have QD flush cup attachment points here to mount your sling on the rifle, and they are at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. And these do have steel inserts, so you don't have to worry about your QD sling stud wallowing out the holes and causing problems later on. Now, it does come with a standard sling stud attachment, so if you utilize a standard sling, then you do have an ability to attach it there. Also, if you use a Harris bipod, then it will attach right there just fine. Now, we do have an M-LOK rail on here so that our Atlas bipod can fit on the bottom of it, but we did shoot it with a Harris on the QD stud for quite some time, and it worked just fine. There are no problems at all. The rail attaches to the center section by 3 screws, and there are steel inserts in the rail, so steel threads that the screws are going into, so you don't have to worry about over-tightening it and stripping those out in most instances. Although I have a feeling once you put this guy together, you're going to keep it together. Now, one point that I will get to on assembly, when you're assembling the rifle, you will need to bolt the action into the center section first before you slide on the tube. Now this does have an advantage too though, because if you have different systems, different configurations, then you have the ability to unbolt one tube and bolt on a new tube without messing up your torque settings and without actually having to break the action loose from the center section. So that's kind of cool. But that is the NV rail. Now, if you want to go a little bit lighter weight, you don't need a 12 o'clock rail, then there is the no rail Foreend, and this is just like the NV rail, just you don't have a top 12 o'clock rail here. Instead, you just have an M-LOK interface, and you can just bolt a rail onto it anywhere you want. So if you're not sure if you need that, you can go ahead and get the no rail and add a Picatinny rail to the M-LOK interface at the 12 o'clock later on if you find that you do need to bolt something on there. And again, we do have M-LOK all around it, so it's very easy to install it wherever you need to install it. And then on the opposite side of things, we have the full rail Foreend. And this is the 18-inch full rail Foreend. And as you notice, the entire 12 o'clock surface is covered by a Picatinny rail. And then we have M-LOK everywhere else. Now you can get a 20 MOA receiver rail or scope mounting base that will mate up with the rail on the handguard that will give you an unbroken or a continuous 20-minute rail on the top of the rifle. So if you are in critical instances where you have devices that need to be co-aligned with the scope on that same plane, then this is the kind of system that you would want to go with. Now, if for some reason you wanted to actually mount iron sights on top of this, like flip-up sights, then you could actually do that with this rail system. I don't think that's the best application for it, but if that's what you wanted to do, you could actually do that, and that will work just fine. So you do have a ton of options with lengths and configurations for the Foreend tube, so that is really great. But now let's talk about the center section. The center section here, the rifle actually bolts into is really the heart of the overall system. Now coming front to back, the first thing I really like is this palm shelf that they put in here. If you have to shoot the rifle offhand, then this palm shelf is great. That's usually where your hand ends up to get you the best support on the rifle and to give you that tension on that sling. It's got a bit of a beaver tail type shape to it, so it's a little bit wider, so your hand can grip it just fine. But if you need to clamp this into a vise, shooting vise on a tripod, then it works really well. It's a great configuration. The vise can get a hold of it just fine, and you don't have any problems with the rifle squirming around in there. It does have a nice composite gripping area on here, so you're not grabbing on to just bare aluminum. So it will give you a little bit of temperature insulation between the chassis if you're in really, really cold environments. Now when we move back from that, we have the front of the mag well here, and they put some really aggressive machining on this, and this works great as a barricade stop. There were quite a few times while I was shooting competition with it that I would run the rifle into the barricade, for instance if I was shooting off top of a post or a fence, and run that front of the mag well up into there, and it grips on very well. You don't have to worry about the rifle climbing up and trying to go over and then adding pressure to your magazine. I really like it when we have some kind of stop in front of the magazine, so that we're not putting pressure on the magazine and we're not causing those rounds in the magazine to change position. That can cause you malfunctions if you are putting pressure on the magazine and the mag well happens to be loose. Now we'll come back and talk about the mag well on the ESS chassis. Now on the setup that we have sitting in front of here, I have actual MDT magazines, but we also ran this with Accurate mags and AICS mags, as well as Magpul magazines. The mag well is cut out a little bit inside on the sides, so the MDT magazines can actually be filled to capacity. We've had problems with the MDT polymer magazines in the past, when you put 10 rounds into them, they bulge a little bit, and some chassis you run into problems actually getting them inserted or removing them when they're filled to capacity. We didn't have any problems with the ESS chassis because they do machine out the sides of the magazine well to give you a little bit more space to run the mags. So you can run their polymer mags. We didn't have any problems running AICS mags or accurate mags, but one thing that MDT did is they kept the front to back dimensions in the mag well pretty tight, and the dimensions between the receiver and the magazine latch are pretty tight. And they did this to prevent the mag from rattling around in there or unintentionally dropping the mag, but the unfortunate drawback of that is it does take a pretty stout slap on the bottom of the magazine to make sure that it's seated and latched into the mag well. So I would recommend for competitors, make sure that your bolt is back when you insert your magazine and give it a nice tap and then tug it to make sure that it is latched in there. That's a good habit to get into anyway, but it's definitely something that you want to do on this chassis, at least until you get it well broken in, to make sure that those magazines are tight in there. Now, the magazine well is not drop free with most of the magazines that we tried, so when you hit the magazine release, you are going to have to grab the magazine and extract the magazine manually. It's not going to fall free without any pulling on it. Now, the advantage of that is if you accidentally bump your mag release on something, you're probably not going to have your magazine fall out in the middle of a stage. So there are pros and cons to that. There aren't a lot of stages where you have to do a speed reload with your magazine. A lot of PRS competitors are running magazine extensions to allow them to get more than 10 rounds in the magazine. And those times where you do run over 10 rounds, usually either a round holder on the side to throw spare rounds in or something of that nature is going to be quicker than actually fishing in your gear and executing a true magazine change. So I don't see that as a real drawback. It's going to be a personal preference kind of thing. So again, most of the AICS magazines we tried worked just fine. Now we'll come back and we'll talk about the magazine release. The mag release is a really nice feature on here. It does not stick out any wider than the magazine well itself, so there's not a ton of chance of it getting hung up on anything. It only sticks a little bit below the trigger guard, and that's just a tiny bit, just enough I can feel it when I run my finger across it. It is ambidextrous. It's positioned so I can hit it with my trigger finger with no problem, or I can come up and hit it with my support side thumb to extract the magazine. So overall, it works really well. The only drawback to that, again, is it does take a good slap on the magazine to make sure it's seated with most magazines. Now, the MDT magazines, the polymer mags, and it seems like the Magpul magazines as well, they lock in just fine without that slap, but the metal magazines that we tried did need a little bit of an extra tap to get them seated in there. Now, as we come back across the receiver, we'll come to one of my favorite additions to this chassis system, and that are the thumb ramps right here on either side of the tang. More and more I've come to the point where I like, when I'm shooting prone, to be able to run same side thumb. It allows me to get up on the bolt handle a whole lot quicker. I like to be able to have my thumb up there to anchor my hand to allow my trigger finger to work most efficiently, and I really don't like having to wrap my thumb around the pistol grip unless it's really needed to stabilize the rifle. So I really like that MDT put these ramps in here. The trigger guard is a nice spacious trigger guard, no problem getting gloved hands in there, and it should fit most triggers that you're going to install. Now, we do have a Trigger Tech trigger on here. We also shot it with a CG Extreme Mod 22 trigger, which is a fairly large trigger, and we didn't have any problems with getting that trigger into the inlet. Talking about the inlet real quick, something that you can't see in here, Modular Driven Technologies did open up their inlet, so it should be able to accommodate oversized PTG lugs. We have an early model of the chassis which didn't accommodate the large PTG lugs, but they have assured me that that is something that they've resolved, and it now should fit large oversized lugs. So you should be able to get the rifle in there if you have a large lug on it. That is one thing that a lot of chassis manufacturers overlook. If you send your rifle off to your gunsmith and they put an oversized lug in, it's really a pain in the butt to get it back and realize that you have to send your chassis off to have the recoil lug recessed opened up to have that oversized lug fit in there. Installation of the action in the chassis itself is really easy. As I said, you start without the tube on it. It's just 2 screws to bolt the action down in. Then you slide your Foreend tube on and install the 3 screws that hold the Foreend on. And that's really all there is to it. So there's nothing out of the ordinary. If you need to pull it apart for maintenance, it's very easy. It doesn't take any time at all. Now let's come back to the buttstock. And the buttstock is one of those places that they really put a lot of work into. This is really very similar to their skeleton stock that we showed on the TAC-21 chassis, but this is specifically designed for the ESS chassis, and it's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit lighter weight, and it looks really nice on this chassis. And this is my buttstock preference, and I'll talk about the other available buttstock here in a minute. But because we have the thumb ramps on here, MDT had to go a little bit thinner in the back of the chassis so that your thumb wasn't cranked all the way out to the side. And doing that prevented them initially from going with an AR type mounting system on some of their previous stocks. So this is a proprietary mounting system on the back of the center section. And we have our skeleton stock here, which, as I said, is very similar on the previous skeleton stock. We have thumb wheel adjustment for the comb height and the length of pull, and we have an Allen head screw in here to lock that adjustment in. And the way that works is we have one threaded rod that works on the thumb wheel, and then we have a smooth rod that goes through a pinch bolt type setup back here. So once you get it dialed in, and it's very easy to turn the thumb wheel when everything is loosened up, once you get it dialed in, you'll come back here and you'll tighten down that pinch bolt. And it does take a considerable amount of force to apply to that pinch bolt to get it really cranked in there so that there's no more movement. But that makes it quick to get dialed in without really fumbling with any adjustments or slipping things up and down. So that was really nice. The same thing for the length of pull. You have one thumb screw here, one thumb wheel, a threaded rod, and then a smooth rod and a pinch bolt on the back. Now there is one drawback to this setup, and since we only have one rod here that locks in, you'll notice that there is nothing preventing the front of the cheek piece to move. So if I really start to move this wheel, you can see the front of the cheek piece will move up and down, even though I've got that pinch bolt cranked all the way down. We did talk to Modular Driven Technologies about this, and they may be looking at a redesign in the future to do two smooth rods and a pinch bolt to be able to resolve that. But in reality, actually shooting this, it's not a big issue. You're not going to turn this enough that it's really going to alter your adjustment. It's just one of those small engineering points that when I looked at it, I wasn't 100% happy with the way that was set up. I believe they were probably trying to save a little bit of weight, and of course, anytime you remove materials or remove machining, you're saving a little bit of cost too. So I think there was a point there that they were trying to stop at and not over-engineer the platform. In function, you don't notice it at all. Just while I'm sitting here fiddling with it at the bench, it's something that I notice. Now when we come back to the butt pad assembly, I already mentioned the adjustment and the pinch bolt on the butt pad assembly, but you also have a height adjustment on the butt pad, so you can loosen it up. It's dovetailed in here, and you can slide it up or slide it down to get it lined up wherever you want. In addition to the up and down, you can loosen it up, and you also can either slide or cant the butt pad to one side or the other. So you really have a lot of adjustability here to get the butt pad dialed in just for your shoulder pocket. The recoil pad on it is a very comfortable, it's a nice squishy, very absorbing recoil pad. So if you're putting a large caliber rifle in this chassis, 300 Win Mag or something bigger, then you do have some recoil absorption in the pad itself. What I like about the pad, because this is a 308, it's not a recoil monster, especially with a suppressor or a brake on it, the pad has just enough of a tacky feel to it that it does stick into your shoulder pocket, and you don't have to worry about sliding around anywhere. So really nice, really enjoyable. And the adjustment is a real nice thing to have. Now, one drawback that some users did notice, and we have on this chassis and also the pre-production chassis that MDT sent us back in January, is that when you slide the butt pad up or down, for instance, let's say for the argument that I slide the butt pad up, well, the edges of the dovetail are now exposed at the bottom of the butt pad, and on the original setup, those edges are very sharp, and they could catch skin, they could catch gear, they could tear nylon. And we talked to MDT about that, and they have assured me that on the current versions, they have changed that a little bit and rounded those points off, so they should not catch skin or gear or cause any damage. Now, the drawback to that, of course, is when the pad is centered in the middle of the assembly, it's a nice smooth-looking machine setup here, but I think not having those edges when you adjust the pad is worth just a little bit of drawback to the aesthetics of the overall system. The last thing I want to talk about on here is they've removed a lot of metal here to really give you a lightweight, well-balanced system, and they do have QD flush cups down here at the back and up here at the heel of the stock. So you do have some options on how you attach your sling to the chassis system. Now, if you don't want to go with the skeleton stock, when you're configuring it, you do also have the option of ordering the skeleton carbine stock. The skeleton carbine stock is a very interesting design, and we first saw this at SHOT Show, and it comes with a adapter that now allows you to go from the proprietary end of the center section, which is these two lugs and a center bolt, to a standard AR tube type setup. So theoretically, if you wanted to run your favorite AR buttstock, assuming that it is just a tube type, that you don't have to have that lower locking lug, then you could get this adapter and put whatever buttstock you wanted to on this chassis. As I said, my favorite is still the skeleton stock, so that's what I would recommend. But if you want a little bit more, or if you really want to be able to have a much higher cheek piece, or you just want something a little bit different, then the skeleton's carbine stock is a great option. Now, the butt pad here is the same as the assembly on the skeleton stock, so you have the same types of adjustments. You have the same thumb wheel, you have the same pinch bolt, you have the same up and down adjustment, you still have the same cant adjustment to it. It's just in a little bit more of a compact assembly. There are separate tubes available, so you can get the correct tube for your length of pull, and you do have a little bit of adjustment on the length of pull, but you really want to get that tube pretty close so that you're not using up all of your length of pull adjustment in the butt pad itself. Now, the really interesting piece is the adjustable comb on the skeleton carbine stock. So you've got two rods here, and you have a thumb wheel adjustment, and you do have pinch bolts in it, so once you get it set up, you can dial in those adjustments and lock them down so they don't change, and you have a considerable bit of height adjustment on here. Now, it does have a nice padded cheek piece on here, but the one drawback to the skeleton carbine stock, and again why I would go with the regular skeleton stock, is support side shooting is going to be considerably more difficult with this. As you notice, there's really nothing here to rest your cheek on, so you're going to be resting it on the edge of the cheek pad here. And also the way the design is set up, your cheek is not going to be all the way up here on the top. You're going to be somewhere down here in the middle. So when you go to the support side, your cheek weld is probably going to be a lot higher than you're expecting. So one of the drawbacks there. Now, you can just remove this piece completely if you don't need that much height and just put padding on the actual tube itself and use the tube. Remember, this is a bolt gun, so you don't have a spring or buffer running around in there to cause any really nasty vibrations in the side of your face. So that is possible, but I kind of think that you're wasting a little bit of money there because there is quite a bit tied up in this adjustable comb assembly. I would like to see MDT in the future offer a version of this without the comb assembly for guys that maybe want to just put this on an AR and don't need that huge added raised comb. The skeleton stock or skeleton carbine stock installs very easily. You just screw it into the adapter here. There is a set screw in the bottom that you line it up, lock it down, and then you screw down your castle nut to lock everything in, and there you go. We have got a little bit of time shooting on it, but as I said, I much prefer this stock. I think it looks a lot better with the overall aesthetic of the chassis, and it's much easier to shoot on the support side. One last thing I'm going to cover really quick is the pistol grip. This is a standard AR type pistol grip mounting surface, so just about any AR pistol grip that you like will fit on here. But one thing you need to be careful of is if you use a duckbill pistol grip, it can't be a hard plastic duckbill. It really needs to be soft, because the radius back here is not exactly the same as an AR-15. So you'll notice on the Hogue pistol grip that we have on here, it is bent down a little bit. Now if you use something like an ergo grip, that shouldn't be a problem, or an ergo flat top, that shouldn't be a problem either. If you are going to use a hard plastic grip with a duckbill, just expect that you are going to have to do some modification to it. And the ESS chassis does not come with a pistol grip, so you will have to provide your own AR type pistol grip. Now overall, the chassis has been a joy to work with. I shot it in a couple of matches. I shot it in the last Guardian match that we shot down at Woody's. Really overall, it is great. There are a couple of things that I really would like to see. This Foreend here, the palm shelf, could very easily be turned into a ARCA type interface, so that if you have something like a really right stuff tripod, then it would snap right into it. There are also a lot of accessories now for precision rifle competition shooters that are ARCA based, so it'd be nice to see if this was an ARCA type setup. You could put an ARCA rail up front, an ARCA interface here, and then you could switch your bipod from front to back, because there are now ARCA bipod interfaces, and have a lot of ability there, or snap it into a tripod, or snap various barricade stops on here. So it seems like it wouldn't be really difficult to machine that interface in here, or come down and add an ARCA rail on the bottom. So that's just one of those really small added things. I would have liked to have seen the magwell a little bit larger, so that magazines are drop free. That also allows for, if you're using some non-standard magazine that swells a little bit, then you're going to be a little bit better off. But again, overall, I think it's a really nice chassis. I have had a ton of fun working with this chassis, and I'm looking forward to many more range trips on it. It is one of my top choices for chassis right now, and really in its price point, it offers you a ton of value. Depending upon how you configure the chassis and what different options you get on it, the price point is just under $1,000. So again, you're getting a ton of value for $1,000. And the accuracy of the rifle bolted into this chassis is absolutely great. It pretty much allows the rifle to perform to its mechanical peak. So the limitation is not the chassis, the limitation is the barrel on here. And we are shooting with a factory Remington barrel on this, but we didn't have any problems with accuracy at all. Fun chassis to work with. Overall, I think it's going to be a very durable chassis in the long run. And I found very few things to complain about. Most of it was stuff that was really surrounding the original production run, and they have changed up, and they have made some alterations on the fly to fix everything that we really thought was an issue on the beginning models. So overall, I can definitely give the Modular Driven Technologies ESS chassis 2 thumbs up, and I can definitely recommend it if you are looking for a long range or a competition-oriented chassis system. That's about it for our review of the Modular Driven Technologies ESS chassis. If you have any questions or comments over anything we've covered, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you like this video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot!